dedicated fan group that follows him around a little bit because they know how popular he is here. Mark arrived in New Mexico in '97. He installed the first solar power system in the state. It was legally permitted to upload electricity to the power grid.
Right.
Legally, not illegally. I like the distinction there. Perhaps we can have him expand on that.
They were illegal.
He co-founded the Southwest Energy Institute and the citizen action group People for Independent Energy to promote decentralization of electric power. Last year, about this time, less than a year ago, he went to Washington, D.C. to testify, and then also to Russia, where he was invited to speak on microgrid power systems, the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation. His award-winning work in energy was profiled in the book Voices of the American West, and that's just kind of his official biography. I know just talking to Mark, very often you leave a conversation saying, yeah, but if people just knew how easy it is or that the technology existed, couldn't they apply it? And Mark kind of has that sigh of, you're so naive. I try.
I never said that.
No, you don't. You were very gracious. But to hear Mark is really to realize how much potential there is. And I suspect it will be similar today. We'll leave here shaking our heads saying, why isn't this being applied? So I'm really excited to have Mark Sardella here. Thank you all. And here you go, Mark.
Thanks. Thank you, Zaylee. That was a very kind introduction. And yeah, no, my goal is to leave you all as bummed out as possible. So I think actually, I keep getting invited back to this group. I've spoken on the sinking of the Deepwater Horizon. I spoke a couple of times about Santa Fe drawing its water from underneath a nuclear waste dump. So the fact that you show up for yet another one of my talks, I know that this is what's left of you. I'm sure I can lay it on pretty heavy. So I hope to set a new personal best for bumming you out. The truth is, I want you to know, just as Zaylee said, I do want you to know the reality of what's going on in the power grid because. I'm somewhat of a geek. I've gone to engineering school, and in engineering school, a number of you probably have scientific backgrounds. In fact, I know a bunch of you do. It's kind of the science and the art of problem solving. And, one of the things you learn when you learn the science and art of problem solving is that no problem gets solved until you have your arms all the way around the problem. You can think you understand what's going on, and if you don't, your potential, your probability that you're going to actually solve the problem is way, way down. So that's the point of this. Why? You might say, why has this guy sitting here spent 20 years looking at the problem of the power grid? And the answer is, I don't have my arms all the way around it yet, but I've gotten my arms most of the way around it. And we aren't just going to talk about the problem. I do get criticized a lot in my talks for spending a lot of time on the problem and not enough time telling all of you what to do. The truth is, I know a lot more about the problem than I do how to tell you what to do about it. And what to do about it is a much more complicated problem. So, we're going to do some geeky stuff, but I'm going to give you some really general stuff here too. Let me give you the premise of my talk today. The premise is that the power grid in the United States, and a lot of places around the world really, the power grid is stuck in the 1960s. Technologically, sociologically, economically, financially, we're stuck in the 1960s. And that is to our detriment for a number of reasons. And it needs to evolve. And, technologies do evolve. Name a technology that hasn't evolved since the 60s other than the power grid. And it's not to say there hasn't been any evolution of the power grid, but by and large, we're stuck in the 1960s. So that is the premise of my talk, is that we're stuck and we need to get moving. And the questions I want to ask, and I want you to be asking yourself, is how did this happen? What does it actually take to stall a technology so that for 50 years it remains the same and doesn't evolve? And the most important question and the hard question, as I said before, what would it take to actually get the power grid moving? What is it going to take to actually get it moving? And I know, we talk a lot about solar and wind power, and we're going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about what is and isn't a solution. And as I said, I have a lot more experience with what isn't a solution. So, by the way, if I say something totally outrageous or I misspeak or you're completely lost, you can interrupt me. You know, I prefer to hold a discussion session at the end, but you can totally interrupt me. By the way, Zaylee, what time should I be going till? About 30 minutes?
Officially until 12, but speak for about 40 minutes, and then we'll open it
Okay.
to discussion.
I might even do a little less because I want to have a robust interaction session. So why does it matter, first of all, that the power grid is stuck in the 60s? Why is this a concern to us? What's the motivation we should have for changing it? I mean, the 60s were great, right? We put a man on the moon. You know, the Beatles were on it, Sullivan. You know, the 60s were a good time. 8-track tapes were invented. AstroTurf was invented. That's probably going to come in handy in Santa Fe's future unless it starts raining. So, there were a lot of great things about the 60s. I mean, you know, notwithstanding Martin Luther King being assassinated and several other things. But by and large, the 60s were a great time. It matters because the electric power industry of the 60s, and again, largely the one we have today, emits more toxic pollution into the environment than all other industries combined. Now take in that fact for just a second. And be careful how I parse my words here. Because I'm talking about electric power as an industry, and then we're talking about the other industries as paper, plastics, chemicals, refining. We're not talking about transportation as in all of you driving around your cars. Because all of the cars added together are almost as big as the power grid. They're not. It's about 28% for cars, and it's about 33% for electric power. So about a third of all greenhouse gas emissions, one industry. Paper, plastics, chemical, refining, and agriculture combined do not emit the toxic pollution and the greenhouse gas emissions of the electric power industry. That's the reason we care. That's the technology of the 60s. That's the pollution of the 60s. You know, LA was much dirtier in the 60s than it is today. The air quality was terrible. Some of you know. So that's the main reason we're concerned about it. We want to attack this problem of climate change. We're looking in the wrong spot. It really is the production of electricity that's, by and large, the main thing. So there's a simple solution, of course. For every complex problem, there's a simple solution, and it's wrong. Who actually said that? Does anybody know whose quote that is?
Some ancient Greek.
No, I can't take it. What was it? Yeah. I like Buckminster Fuller. No, Gore Vidal. There is no human problem that cannot be solved if everyone would simply do as I say. That's my favorite. So all we need to do really is add solar and wind, right? This is what we all focus on. This is what makes all the news. You know, every time another building gets a solar panel on it, the New Mexican does a feature article on it. So, you know, all we got to do is add solar and wind. Well, solar technology has really started, you know, its rise about 40 years ago, and of course it's much, much more now. Does anybody want to wager a guess at what percentage of U.S. electricity is now generated by solar photovoltaics?
8%. 1.
Better, it's 1. It's actually less than 1. We're almost up to 1. Wind energy's done a little better, especially in recent years. We're up to about 3% with wind. So again, the same question is going to be why 40 years after the development of these technologies is their market penetration so small? There's another simple solution. And this is where I have to put on my nerd hat, and you do too, actually, if you're going to follow this. The other solution is pretty boring. It's to raise the production side efficiency. You know, whenever we talk about electricity efficiency, whenever any article comes out on efficiency, it's always about your light bulbs. You're not using the right light bulbs. You didn't weather strip under the door of your house. You know what I'm saying? It's always about consumption side efficiency. It's always your problem. The electric power industry generates at a delivered efficiency of around 33%. 30%. About 30%. And what that means in nerd terms is, nerd or geek? I should just stop with the self-deprecation. What it means is you burn 100 units of fuel and you deliver 30 units of energy, and the other 70 units just goes off as a waste product. So you're burning 3 times as much fuel to do the work as you would need to be if you were 100% efficient. Does that make sense?